Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the hidden facts about Elden Ring's incantations, the spells of gods, monsters, and forgotten ages that still whisper their secrets to anyone willing to listen. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what other games you want me to cover next. And subscribe if this helps you sleep. The Dragon Communion Devolution. There is a transformation waiting inside every warrior who partakes in Dragon Communion, and it does not stop. The incantation descriptions make this disturbingly clear. Those who consume dragon hearts and channel their power over time begin to physically change. Their eyes become slitted and reptilian, their bodies gradually shed the shape of a human being, and their hunger grows insatiable. The magma worms scattered across the lands between, those enormous worm-like fire breathers who drag themselves across molten rock on twisted limbs, were once human heroes. Adventurers, warriors, people with names and histories who simply consumed one too many dragon hearts and found themselves unable to stop. The magma breath incantation carries the line. Those who have performed the Dragon Communion will find their humanity slowly slipping away. Once they fully succumb to their fate, they are left no more than worms that crawl the earth. This is not a metaphor. It is a species-level warning that from software buried in the item description of a spell most players cast without reading. The origin of Dragon Communion. Dragon Communion did not begin as a spiritual practice or a religious offering. It began as an act of war, specifically as revenge. In an age long before the Erdtree cast its golden light over the lands between, Dragon Lord Placidusax was attacked by Baal the Dread, a great and treacherous drake who was once part of Placidusax's own domain. Their clash was catastrophic. Both were gravely wounded. Baal, injured and cowardly, fled to the jagged peak. In retaliation, Placidusax had his most loyal followers assume mortal humanoid forms and travel into the lands of men, where they taught warriors to hunt drakes, Baal's kin, and consume their hearts. The very act of Dragon Communion, the ritual of eating a dragon's heart at a sacred altar and absorbing its power, was designed as a military strategy. The Church of Dragon Communion, those quiet altars you find on isolated island cliffs and inside hidden cathedrals, are the legacy of a dragon lord's wounded pride and desire for revenge against a traitor. The 4 dragon hearts threshold. There is a specific threshold in Dragon Communion that changes the player visibly and permanently, and most players discover it by accident. Once a Tarnished acquires 4 or more Dragon Communion incantations, through the exchange of dragon hearts, their eyes transform. The irises blaze gold, and the whites of the eyes turn black, the pupils narrowing into long serpentine slits, draconic and unsettling, like something predatory wearing a human face. It is a subtle thing on the character select screen, easy to miss unless you are looking, but it carries enormous lore weight. The body is beginning its long, slow devolution. You have not just learned a spell, you have taken something inside you that does not intend to leave. The transformation can be undone by visiting Fia's mirror in the Round Table Hold, which says something interesting about Fia herself, that she possesses a method of reversing draconic corruption, tucked away quietly in the same room where she cradles the dying. The game never explains how. It simply offers the option and moves on. Placidusax's ruin is not what it appears. There is a quiet but significant fact about Placidusax's ruin that many players overlook. It is not technically a Dragon Communion incantation. Every other power gained by consuming dragon hearts belongs to the Dragon Communion school, but Placidusax's ruin obtained from his remembrance, does not carry that classification. It belongs to no school at all. It has no affiliation, no boosting seal, no category bonus. It sits alone in the incantation roster, like something the game itself cannot categorize. This makes sense when you consider what Placidusax is. Not a dragon in the conventional sense, but the ancient Elden lord of a prior age, a two-headed creature of gold and ruin, who still waits in a storm outside of time. What he unleashes in that arena is not a breath weapon. It is something older. The incantation reflects this. Twin beams of golden destruction that sweep through the air, more divine than draconic. The game's taxonomy has no box for what Dragon Lord Placidusax was, so it left his power without one. Greol never fought back. Elder Dragon. Greol is one of the most hauntingly passive creatures in all of Elden Ring. She lies sprawled across the dragon barrow in Caelid, an enormous, ancient body with 5 smaller dragons clustered around her like children refusing to let go. She does not attack the tarnished. She does not move. She simply endures whatever is done to her, her vast form bleeding and rot-touched, and yet still breathing. The 5 lesser dragons, her children presumably, are the ones who fight on her behalf. But Greol herself has given up. Her incantation, Greol's Roar, is one of the most coveted dragon spells in the game, and it costs 3 dragon hearts rather than the standard 1, because what you are taking from her is something greater. You are taking the voice of the mother of all dragons in Caelid, the elder of an ancient lineage, a creature old enough to remember when dragons ruled the lands between. Her roar debuffs every enemy who hears it, lowering their attack power. Even in incantation form, even wielded by a tarnished, the sound of Greol's voice still commands something ancient. Bale's lore connects to Placidusax in ways players miss. When the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC introduced Bale the Dread, it completed a story that the base game had only hinted at through item descriptions and incantation lore. Bale is the reason Dragon Communion exists. He is the traitor Drake whose attack on Placidusax set the entire cycle of human warriors consuming dragon hearts into motion. And then he fled to the Jagged Peak, where over centuries he simply grew. The incantations obtained from Bale, Bale's flame lightning, and Bale's tyranny are notable for having extremely high arcane requirements rather than faith, setting them apart from almost every other dragon incantation. This is not accidental. Bale's fire is something distinct from the communion fire of Placidusax's followers. It is corrupted, feral, evolved in isolation over thousands of years into something that does not fit neatly into the categories that organize the world. You can only receive one of his 2 incantations per playthrough, which mirrors the binary choice of a war that never truly ended. Placidusax's vengeance answered, or Bale's legacy preserved. Ghostflame Breath and the Dying Dragons. The Ghostflame Dragon enemies introduced in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC breathe a cold, pale fire that looks like nothing else in the game. Somewhere between mist and flame, ashen and hollow, the color of something that used to burn, but has been burning for so long, it has forgotten heat. The Ghostflame Breath incantation you obtain from them carries this aesthetic perfectly. It deals cold, magic-adjacent damage and builds up frostbite with a wide-spreading cloud. Lore-wise, Ghostflame is associated with the ancient dead, with things that linger beyond their proper time. The Ghostflame dragons are remnants of a draconic age so old, it predates even the established Dragon Communion records. They are not the fire-breathing lords of the old stories. They are echoes. What you learn by consuming their power is not strength. It is the cold patience of something that has already died and simply has not stopped moving yet. Lanciax's glaive and the ancient dragon who stayed. Most of Elden Ring's ancient dragons retreated or were killed after the fall of Placidusax and the rise of the Erdtree's golden age. Lanciax chose differently. She made a home for herself on the Altus Plateau, those high golden fields above the fog of Liurnia, and by all available evidence, she has been there ever since. Not warring, not hiding, simply existing in the fading light of an age that has long since passed. Lanciax's glaive, the incantation you obtain from her, summons a massive blade of crackling red lightning. The ancient red lightning of the Dragon Lords, distinct from the golden lightning of the Dragon Cult. When she swoops down to attack you in the field, she is using a version of this exact same weapon, throwing the lightning glaive from her own enormous body. The fact that she does not immediately attack the player, that she circles at altitude before engaging rather than diving in at first sight, suggests she may not be aggressive by nature, or at least that she is not driven by the territorial rage of a wounded creature. She reads more like a creature that has accepted her circumstances and only fights when she has no other choice. The Church of Dragon Communion sits on an island no one was meant to find. The very first Dragon Communion altar you encounter in Elden Ring. The Church of Dragon Communion is hidden. You reach it not by walking to it, but by going through the coastal cave in Limgrave, fighting the twin demi-human chiefs in the dark, and emerging through a tunnel onto a small island completely cut off from the mainland. There is no road to this place. There is no obvious marker pointing toward it. It sits alone on a cliff above the sea, holding an altar and the ruins of what was once a place of worship, weathered and half forgotten. The geography is deliberate. Dragon Communion was never intended to be a mainstream religion in the lands between. It was practiced in secret, in hidden places, by those willing to descend into dark tunnels and emerge somewhere they were never supposed to be. Even the incantations themselves come without fanfare. You simply exchange a dragon heart at the altar, and the power enters you. No ceremony, no blessing, just consumption. The clawmark seal and what it reveals about Gurranq. Before you ever reach the bestial sanctum or meet Gurranq the beast clergyman in person, you can receive a piece of him. The clawmark seal, a sacred seal shaped from bone and claw that specifically boosts bestial incantations. What the clawmark seal description quietly reveals is that Gurranq, this enormous, robed, wolf-like creature who seems to be a wandering holy man eating death root in the wilds of Caelid, is a clergyman of genuine rank and power. Cinkadea, wielding clerics of high standing, are rare in the lands between, and they are always important. The seal's visual design, carved from some creature's enormous claw and clearly ancient, implies that whatever Gurranq is, he has been a figure of spiritual authority for a very long time. Longer, perhaps, than the Erdtree's current golden age has existed. The bestial sanctum itself is filled with statues of the same beastman form that Gurranq wears. And those same statues appear all over crumbling Farum Azula, the city outside of time. Gurranq's name means death of the demigods. The item description for the Beast Claw incantation, one of the spells Gurranq teaches the Tarnished in exchange for Deathroot, contains a single line of devastating information. Long ago, Gurranq was a beast of such terrifying ferocity that his former name meant death of the demigods. His former name, not his current name. Gurranq is a title, or perhaps a chosen name, the name of the hungry clergyman collecting deathroot in Caelid. But before that, he had a different name, one that described him as something so feared that even demigods, the divine children of Marika, regarded him as a potential executioner. What happened between being the death of the demigods and becoming a robed figure handing incantations to tarnished strangers in exchange for cursed roots? The answer is Marika. She gave him a purpose and a leash. You learn eventually that Gurranq is Malekith, Queen Marika's shadow-bound beast and half-brother. The most terrifying creature in the lands between was given a cloak and a prayer book and told to wait. Malekith's inner face. There is a moment in the bestial sanctum that most players never discover, because it requires a very specific angle and the willingness to clip the camera through Gurranq's hood. If you manage it, typically after calming him down when he turns hostile, you will see Malekith's face and helmet beneath the clergyman disguise. The robes are not a metaphor. They are a literal covering. The beast's true form, armored and ancient, and carrying the weight of the rune of death, is physically present inside Gurranq's body at all times, waiting. He wears the clerical hood the way a soldier wears civilian clothes in a city that does not know there is a war. The bestial sanctum's guardian, the black blade kindred gargoyle standing at the gates, drops weapons described as bearing the mark of those who serve Malekith, the Black Blade. The sanctum itself is guarded by Malekith's honor guard. Every detail of the area announces who Gurranq really is, if you know how to read the language the game speaks. Feeding Gurranq makes him dangerous. The fourth death root you bring to Gurranq changes something in him. He turns hostile the next time you visit the sanctum. No warning, no explanation, just the sudden lurch of a massive creature attacking the person who has been feeding him. The beast's hunger for deathroot is described repeatedly as unquenchable, like an addiction that worsens with every dose. Each root he consumes gives him a brief relief from the constant need, but then the need returns, deeper and more desperate than before. The rune of death, sealed inside him, reacts to deathroot, because deathroot is the physical manifestation of the death it came from. Godwyn's cursed demise spread like a sickness through the roots of the great tree underground. What you are feeding Gurranq is pieces of the thing he was created to contain, and it is making him worse. The only way to calm him down when he attacks is to do enough damage that his hunger overtakes his aggression. He collapses, whimpering, the beast overpowered by its own craving. It is one of the most quietly tragic NPC interactions in the entire game. Bestial vitality and the magic of the body. Among all of Gurranq's teachings, bestial vitality is perhaps the most beloved by players because of what it does. It causes the tarnished's body to slowly regenerate health over a significant duration, the wound closing from within rather than from any external grace or holy light. The visual effect is visceral. A faint bestial sigil appears, and you can almost feel something tightening, healing, knitting. Lore-wise, bestial incantations are fundamentally different from Erdtree or Golden Order spells. They do not draw power from divine grace or cosmic law. They draw power from the raw, primal force of the body itself, the same life energy that the ancient beastmen of Farum Azula understood as something separate from and older than the Erdtree's Golden Covenant. To cast bestial vitality is not to ask for healing from a god. It is to command your own flesh to persist. The gloam-eyed Queen's black flame could kill gods. Before the Golden Order existed, before Marika sealed destined death inside Malekith's black blade, before the cycle of undead and rebirth, and the great rune of death was locked away. There was a time when black flame could kill anything, including gods. The gloam-eyed queen was an Empyrean, chosen by the two fingers just as Marika was, but she wielded the rune of death directly, channeling it through her own body and through the Godslayer's greatsword. Her godskin followers, raised from infancy, swaddled in cloth stitched from the skin of gods, used this black flame as a weapon in a crusade that the item descriptions call a god hunt. The black flame blade incantation, the black flame ritual, noble presence. These are the remnants of what was once an extinction-level magical arsenal. What you use in battle as a secondary fire damage source was, at one point in the Lands Between's history, the single most dangerous weapon in the world. Malekith sealed the Black Flame's true power. The story of why Black Flame incantations no longer kill gods is one of the most significant backstory moments in all of Elden Ring, and it is told entirely through item descriptions rather than cutscenes. Marika sent her shadowbound beast, the creature who would later disguise himself as Gurranq, to defeat the gloam-eyed queen and end her god-hunting crusade. Malekith succeeded. He defeated the queen, and then Marika removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring itself, sealing it within Malekith's black blade. With that act, the true power of the black flame was locked away forever. The incantation description for scouring black flame says it plainly. The black flame could once slay gods, but when Malekith sealed destined death, the true power of the black flame was lost. What this means for gameplay is subtle but present. Black flame incantations deal a percentage-based tick of damage over time, a ghost of their former ability to eat away at divine beings. The mechanic is not a quirk, it is a memory. The Black Flame monks were fire monks who defected. Among the most interesting lore threads attached to Black Flame incantations is the origin of the Black Flame monks, the robed black fire-wielding enemies you encounter near various important locations. They were not always separate from the fire monks. The Black Flame incantation lore reveals that a faction of fire monks, enthralled by the beautiful and terrible allure of the Black Flame, abandoned their posts entirely. Their duty to the giant's flame, the primal fire atop the mountaintops, was simply abandoned because they found something more captivating. They aligned themselves with the gloam-eyed queen and became part of her god-hunting crusade. Even after her defeat by Malekith, even after the rune of death was sealed away, some of these former fire monks apparently persisted, scattered without their queen. The black flame they wield diminished but never fully extinguished. They are still out there in the lands between, practicing a devotion that should have ended centuries ago. Noble presence and the most ancient apostles. Among the Godskin apostles, the skin-wearing, stretching, serpentine fanatics who carry on the tradition of their defeated queen. There is an older order within the order. The Godskin nobles are described as the most ancient apostles who are said to have assimilated inhuman physiology, not unlike the Crucible. They are the originals, the ones closest to the gloam-eyed queen's personal vision of what her followers should be. Creatures who blur the boundary between human and something else, who have incorporated the physical attributes of inhuman things into their bodies in a manner that echoes the primordial Crucible's ancient blending of all life. Noble presence. The incantation dropped by the Godskin noble at Volcano Manor briefly manifests this inhuman majesty as a tangible aura. The Godskin noble robe specifically boosts its power. In the lore, the nobles were the pioneers of a kind of evolution that the Golden Order would have called heresy. The deliberate merging of human and inhuman nature, not by birth, but by intent. The scouring black flame's missing category. One of the most mechanically interesting things about the Godskin incantations is that several of them, including scouring black flame, have an unusual damage profile that resists conventional boosting. Black flame incantations deal fire damage, but they also deal a percentage of the enemy's maximum health as additional damage over a brief duration. This is why they were once used to kill gods. Immortal beings with enormous health pools are still whittled down by a percentage-based mechanic, whereas flat damage might simply not be enough. Even with destined death sealed, even stripped of their divine slaying potency, the structural logic of the black flame remains. The percentage damage is a vestigial limb, a reminder of what the spell was designed to do, preserved in the mechanical DNA, even after the purpose it served was made impossible. The Godskin swaddling cloth and what the Queen was. Among the most disturbing items in all of Elden Ring is the Godskin swaddling cloth, a talisman found in Spirit Caller Cave, guarded by summoned spirits of both a Godskin apostle and Godskin noble fighting together. Its description reads, "The gloam-eyed Queen cradles newborn apostles swaddled in this cloth. Soon they will grow to become the death of the gods." The gloam-eyed Queen raised her followers from infancy. She did not recruit them. She did not inspire them or convert them to her cause. She created them from the beginning as god-killers, swaddling them in cloth stitched from the skin of beings her earlier followers had already killed, wrapping them in the literal material of her crusade. The apostles' incantations, their black flames, their rituals, their presence, carry this origin in them. When a Godskin apostle stretches across a room and breathes black fire, it is doing what it was literally born to do. The aspects of the crucible are not the Erdtree's magic. Here is something that confuses many players when they first look at the incantation menu. The aspects of the crucible, tail, horns, breath, wings, face, are classified as Erdtree incantations. They appear under the Erdtree seal category, but lore-wise, they are not Erdtree magic at all. They are far older. The primordial crucible is the thing the Erdtree was before the Erdtree existed, the raw, seething source of all life in its unordered, blended together form, before the greater will arrived and the Golden Age began. The crucible mixed all species together, scales on humans, wings on animals, horns sprouting from people who never should have had them. The aspects of the crucible incantations allow the tarnished to manifest these ancient traits physically. A massive horn erupts from the shoulder. A sweeping tail materializes behind the caster. A flame-breathing throat pouch forms and discharges. These spells predate the current golden age of the Erdtree by an incalculable span of time. They are classified as Erdtree incantations only because the Erdtree grew from the crucible. The parent is labeled by the name of the child. The crucibles decay into impurity. The primordial crucible's legacy in the current age of the lands between is largely one of persecution. As civilization advanced under the Golden Order, the traits the crucible had once freely distributed across living things, horns, tails, scales, unusual growths, became marks of impurity. The omen, those cursed children born with horns, were banished from polite society and hidden beneath the city. The misbegotten, born with the mixed features of beast and human, were enslaved. Even the Crucible Knights, the ancient warriors who served Godfrey himself in the earliest age of the Erdtree, were regarded with increasing suspicion As the Golden Order grew more rigid, their power considered too bestial, too close to the chaos the new religion sought to replace. What the Crucible once gave as a blessing, the Erdtree branded as a curse. The aspects of the Crucible incantations carry this history. To cast them in the current age is to reach backward across time and touch something that civilization has spent centuries trying to erase. The 16 Crucible Knights. Lore compiled from the Crucible Knight armor sets and their descriptions establishes that there were originally 16 Crucible Knights. Warriors who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord under the current Erdtree age, and who wielded the ancient Crucible incantations in their military service. They were led by two legendary figures, Ordovis, leader of the Axe Knights, and Siluria, leader of the Tree Knights. The Crucible Axe set and Crucible Tree set that drop from their respective Evergoals carry these markings still. Among the 16, one is described in particular detail, Devonia, the longest serving of the Crucible Knights, who departed from the lands between alone on a quest to find the Crucible's origin. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC reveals what became of her. She traveled to the realm of Shadow and can be found, and fought, in the ancient ruins of Rule, her gaze fixed on the distant gate of divinity. She never returned to the lands between proper, but she did find the edge of the answer she was looking for. Whether she found the Crucible's origin, or only the boundary beyond which no answer could be retrieved, the game does not say. The Crucible aspects are boosted by wearing their history. One of the most elegant mechanical details in Elden Ring is the way the Crucible armor sets interact with the aspects of the Crucible incantations. Each piece of either the Crucible Axe set or the Crucible Tree set boosts the power of Crucible incantations by approximately 3.5%, with a full set providing roughly 17% additional damage. This is not a generic armor bonus. The items themselves are described as holding the power of the Crucible, and wearing them amplifies incantations that draw from the same source. In lore terms, dressing in the armor of the ancient knights who first channeled these primordial forces makes you more effective at channeling those same forces. There is a continuity suggested here that the Crucible's power is not just an abstract magic resource, but something that lingers in the physical objects associated with it, something that recognizes its own. Aspects of the Crucible. Breath and dragons. Among the Crucible incantations, aspects of the Crucible. Breath is one that reveals something deeply interesting about draconic lore when read carefully. It is described as a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the primordial Crucible. The ability to breathe fire, to channel and release a gout of elemental force from within the body, is being explicitly identified here as a feature of the Crucible, not an invention of the dragons. This means that dragon, fire breath, is not something uniquely draconic that humans borrowed by consuming dragon hearts. It is a Crucible trait, one that arose in the shared life soup of the primordial age, one that dragons happened to carry prominently, but which was available to any form of life that the Crucible decided to give it to. The existence of this Crucible incantation implies that at one point long ago, some humans or human-adjacent beings had functional fire breath, not because they consumed a dragon, but simply because the Crucible gave it to them. What the Frenzied Flame really wants, the Frenzied Flame incantations, Flame of Frenzy, Frenzied Burst, Howl of Shabriri, Unendurable Frenzy, Inescapable Frenzy, are not simply powerful fire spells with a madness side effect. They are expressions of a theological position. The Frenzied Flame is not an entity seeking destruction for destruction's own sake. It is, according to Hyeta and Shabriri, a force that believes the fundamental mistake of existence is individuation, the division of the one great into separate beings, separate souls, separate lives full of separate suffering. The frenzied flame wants to melt everything back into the undivided whole. Every incantation in this school, when understood in that context, takes on a different weight. The flame of frenzy does not simply deal fire damage and cause madness. It is the philosophical expression of a cosmic argument that all of this, every person, every kingdom, every tarnished fighting for lordship, was a mistake, and that the kindest thing would be to unmake it. Shabriri, the most reviled man in history. The Howl of Shabriri. Incantation contains a single sentence that reframes everything around it. It is said that the sickness of the flame of frenzy began with Shabriri, the most reviled man in all history. Not one of the most reviled, the most reviled in all of history. His crime, according to the Shabriri's woe talisman, was slander. His eyes were gouged out as punishment, and in the hollow darkness where his eyes had been, the frenzied flame took up residence. This is not incidental. The yellow flame that burns from the eyes of every frenzied flame enemy and from the tarnished who inherits it is the same flame that first appeared in Shabriri's empty sockets, centuries before the events of the game. He did not choose the frenzied flame. The frenzied flame chose him, found an opening in the violence done to him, and entered through the wound. His name became synonymous with the worst thing a person can be in a civilization built on divine order, which is, apparently, someone willing to speak against it. The Shabriri grapes are eyes. What Hyeta asks you for, what she calls Shabriri grapes, and eats with something approaching reverence, are the gouged out eyes of people who have succumbed to the frenzied flame. The yellowed, corrupted eyes of those afflicted by frenzy are called this because eating them allows the person to feel a distant light, to sense the direction of the frenzied flame, even without sight of their own. Hyeta is blind, and the grapes guide her toward the three fingers that she cannot see. When you finally tell her what the grapes actually are, eyeballs, she already knows, on some level. She continues anyway. The final grape you bring her is a fingerprint grape, dropped by festering fingerprint Vike, which means that the last thing she eats before reaching her destination is the eye of a man who spent his life trying to become Elden Lord and failed because Shabriri found him first. The flame did not give Hyeta wisdom, it gave her direction, and direction is sometimes all a person needs to walk willingly into something terrible. The frenzied flame prescription and the merchants, beneath Lendl Royal Capital, in a passage that requires unequipping all armor to even enter. A gesture of complete vulnerability, arriving before the three fingers as naked and undefended as an infant, lies the frenzied flame prescription. But the passage leading there, the subterranean shunning grounds, contains something that most players walk past without fully registering. A vast number of merchant corpses, and a few living survivors still playing string instruments in the dark. The nomadic merchant's finery describes how many merchants once traveled as a great caravan, but were buried alive due to heretical beliefs. Underground, they summoned the three fingers at the frenzied flame prescription. The merchants were the first congregation. They were buried in darkness, their suffering compounding over generations, and from that suffering they called out to the only thing that answered. Not a god of golden grace, but the entity that believes all suffering ends when all difference ends. The three fingers answered the buried. Vike, the tarnished who could have been. Elden Lord, Roundtable Knight. Vike is the closest thing the frenzied flame has to a historical case study in the lands between. A person who could have changed everything and chose not to, because Shabriri found him at the right moment. Vike was a tarnished warrior of such power and grace that he was genuinely close to becoming the Elden Lord. He had followers, he had purpose, he had what appeared to be everything needed to restore the shattered world. And then he descended below the capital and was touched by the three fingers, leaving a permanent burn mark on his armor and an irreversible stain on his mind, because he chose to save his finger maiden rather than sacrifice her at the Forge of the Giants. The frenzied burst incantation, which Vike uses against you in his invasion at the Church of Inhibition, fires concentrated beams of yellow madness inducing flame from the eyes. When you fight Vike, you are fighting a man who once carried the weight of a world and let it go because he could not let someone else burn. Inescapable frenzy, the forbidden embrace. Among all the frenzied flame incantations, Inescapable Frenzy is perhaps the most visually arresting and mechanically unique. The spell does not throw fire, it does not project beams. It causes the caster to lunge forward and wrap both arms around a target, pressing them close in a bear hug, and then releases a devastating burst of frenzied flame at point-blank range, dealing enormous damage and building massive madness build-up. Found past the Cathedral of the Forsaken in the subterranean shunning grounds, in the same descent that leads toward the Three Fingers, the spell's location is thematic. To reach it, you go down, you go deeper, you arrive in a place described as the tomb of an ancient god. And then you learn how to embrace someone and burn them alive with the fire of a philosophy that believes love, connection, closeness, individuality is the source of all pain. The Three Fingers and the Two Fingers are cosmic counterparts. Every major religious power in Elden Ring, the Erd Tree, the Crucible, the Dragon Cult, has organizational logic and internal consistency. The frenzied flame is no different. The Three Fingers are explicitly the counterpart structure to the Two Fingers that serve the greater will, the cosmic force behind Marika's Golden Order. The Two Fingers seek an Elden Lord to maintain the current cosmic arrangement, individuality, order, divine hierarchy. The Three Fingers seek a Lord of frenzied flame to undo it, to incinerate the separations between all things and return everything to the One Great. What this implies about the greater will and the frenzied flame is a question the game gestures toward without fully answering. One theory, supported by Hieta's words about all that there is came from the One Great, suggests that the greater will and the frenzied flame were once the same entity, a unified cosmic force that somehow divided. If true, the entire war between order and chaos being fought through the Tarnished is not a conflict between opposites, but a schism. The Golden Order's true source of power is cosmic law. Players often assume that Golden Order incantations, Radagon's Rings of Light, Discus of Light, Law of Regression, Law of Causality, are simply holy magic, the faith power of divine devotion to the Erd Tree. The actual law is more complex and more interesting. Golden Order fundamentalism, as practiced by the scholarly mages who developed these spells, is about the control of cosmic law, the deep structure of reality as the greater will defined it, the rules by which life and death and causality operate. The Wiki Forum commentary on the Golden Order Incantations page puts it well. This school is about control over life and death forces, over the fundamental rules of existence, not simple worship. Law of regression, for instance, does not just dispel illusions, it reverts things to a prior state, undoing deception and transformation by applying the raw law of what something originally was. Law of causality deals damage after a set number of hits. It is literally a spell that manipulates cause and effect as a physical force. Law of regression and Radagon's secret. The law of regression incantation has a hidden use that goes beyond combat. It is the key to revealing the most profound secret in Lendel, royal capital. There is a message on the floor of the Erdtree sanctuary, written in gold. Regression alone reveals secrets. If you cast Law of Regression on a certain statue of Marika in the capital, something changes. The statue transforms, revealing not Marika's face, but Radagon's. Because Radagon and Marika are the same being, a singular person who split into two separate identities, one male and one female, both of whom held enormous power, and both of whom were, in some sense, always the same. Law of Regression, a spell that undoes transformation and reveals the prior state of things, is literally the only way to see this secret without reading item descriptions. The game hid one of its most significant narrative revelations behind a spell mechanic in a school of incantations that most players never fully invest in. The Golden Order fundamentalists and their uncomfortable overlap with necromancy. There is a fascinating tension in the lore of Golden Order incantations that the game acknowledges without resolving. The same power that allows the Order's hunters to permanently kill the undead, Order's Blade Litany of Proper Death, is, by its very nature, a power over life and death itself. The ability to permanently kill the undead is the ability to permanently kill anyone. Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, who sits in the Round Table Hold as a leader among Tarnished, uses arcane power drawn from outer god sources alongside his apparent allegiance to the Golden Order, which, taken together, suggests the Order's scholars understood that the same force distinguishing holy death from unholy death is largely one of institutional declaration. The Order's incantations predate the actual Golden Order as a political institution, and in their original form, they carried this ambiguity plainly. The power that permanently ends the undead is the same power that could in theory raise them. And the Golden Order simply chose a side, declared one application holy and the other heretical, and codified that choice as divine law. The Elden Star's incantation and the Greater Will's first arrival. Elden Stars is one of the 3 legendary incantations required for the achievement, alongside Flame of the Fell God and Grail's Roar, and it is perhaps the most lore-laden spell in the entire game. Its description reads, "It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring." This is the origin story of the entire world. The Greater Will, the cosmic force that defines everything about the current order of the lands between, arrived as a golden star carrying a beast, the Elden Beast, the final boss, which descended from the heavens and established divine rule. When you cast Elden Stars, you summon a golden orb that releases a chain of smaller projectiles drifting toward enemies like a constellation of tiny falling stars. Mechanically, players debate its usefulness. Lore-wise, you are recreating the moment a god arrived. The Frenzied Flame Seal scales with everything. The Frenzied Flame Seal, obtained through Hieta's questline, appearing on the ground beside her final resting place after the 3 fingers have burned her eyes away, is one of the most mechanically unusual sacred seals in the game. Its description states plainly, it scales incantations using strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith all together. No other seal works this way. Every other seal scales primarily with faith, perhaps with secondary scaling in one other stat. The Frenzied, Flameseal treats all four equally, which carries a lore implication that lines up with everything Hyetta and Shabriri teach. To the Frenzied Flame, all forms of human development lead to the same undivided end. The warrior's strength, the sorcerer's intelligence, the huntress's dexterity, the faithful cleric's devotion. To the Three Fingers, every form of becoming is just another thing to unmake. The seal rewards every investment you have ever made, because to the Frenzied Flame, there is no hierarchy of how you got here. You are here. That is enough. The ancient dragon cult and their war against the dragons they now worship. There is a wonderful historical irony at the heart of dragon cult incantations. The ancient dragon cult, the warriors who developed spells like Lightning Spear, Honed Bolt, Frozen Lightning Spear, and Death Lightning, built their power specifically to kill dragons. The spells exploit a fundamental weakness of dragon physiology. Gravelstone, the material that makes up ancient dragon scales, is uniquely vulnerable to lightning. The dragon cult studied the dragons they hunted and weaponized that weakness into an entire school of magic. Now, thousands of years later, descendants of those same hunters use those same spells as a form of religious devotion to ancient dragons like Fortisax and Lanceax. The weapons of the hunters became the prayers of the faithful. Lightning Spear, once a killing tool, is now a sacred gesture. The dragons who survived long enough, Lanceax on the Altus Plateau, Fortisax in the deep roots, eventually found themselves venerated by the descendants of the people who once tried to exterminate them. Fortisax's Lightning Spear and Death Lightning. Lich Dragon. Fortisax is one of the most hidden bosses in Elden Ring. To reach him, you must complete Fear's entire questline, obtain the curse mark of death, and enter her dreams in the deep-root depths to find him waiting in a vision of the past. The incantations obtained from his remembrance, Fortisax's Lightning Spear and Death Lightning, carry lore that ties directly to his tragic history. Fortisax was one of the ancient dragons who, rather than retreating when the age of the dragons ended, chose to stay in friendship with a human warrior, Godwyn the Golden, Prince of the Erd Tree, one of the most beloved beings in the history of the Lands Between. When Godwyn was killed on the Night of Black Knives, his soul destroyed rather than his body, Fortisax descended into the land of the dead with him and has been fighting Godwyn's cursed death ever since. Death Lightning is lightning that carries the resonance of destined death. The ancient dragon trying to fight an enemy that has no shape, that cannot be struck, that grows and spreads through the roots of the world regardless. The death lightning that puddles hurt, so much more. One of the most important mechanical facts that new players discover about dragon cult incantations, specifically Death Lightning and Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike, is that the real damage is not in the initial strike but in the electrical pools left on the ground afterward. When either spell hits a wet surface or creates a lightning puddle, the conductivity of the lingering energy deals enormous additional damage to anything standing in it. This is not a bug or an unintended interaction. The game treats wet and metal-adjacent surfaces as conductors in ways that are highly consistent. The Frenzied Burst incantation's description even implies awareness of water and standing liquid. Players who understand this build encounters around it, leading bosses into pools, casting in rain, timing spells around terrain. Fortisax himself, when you fight him, stands in a storm. The lightning pools he creates are the same mechanic applied to a dragon's own preferred fighting ground. Lanceax's glaive and the red lightning of old. There are two kinds of lightning in Elden Ring, and they do not look the same. The dragon cult lightning What Knight's lightning spear, honed bolt, and similar spells produce is the gold and white crackling electricity of a military tradition. But Lanciax's glaive produces red lightning, the ancient red draconic electricity of the original dragon lords, the kind that Placidusax used before the dragon cult existed, the kind described in item descriptions as the mark of those who once ruled the lands between. Finding Lanciax alive on the Altus Plateau and harvesting her remembrance means acquiring a piece of something predating the wars that shaped the modern world. The red lightning is not a visual variation on the same concept. It is a different tradition entirely, older, wilder, and carrying the weight of a civilization that lost everything. The Gravel Stone Seal and its dragon cult devotion. The Gravel Stone Seal is one of the most straightforwardly lore-consistent items in Elden Ring. Gravel stone, the material that comprises the scales of ancient dragons, is the primary weakness of those same ancient dragons. And the dragon cult exploited this to build an entire military tradition around lightning-infused strikes against draconic enemies. The Gravel Stone Seal is shaped from this same material, channeling the dragon cult's accumulated knowledge of draconic weakness into a sacred implement that enhances their lightning incantations by 15%. The seal is a weapon made from a shield. Draconic scale, once impenetrable armor, repurposed into the tool of the creature's hunters. Wearing it means carrying a piece of the enemy on your hand, casting their destruction through material once meant to protect them. What the Dragon Communion Seal reveals about split schools. The Dragon Communion Seal, unlike most sacred seals, scales equally with faith and arcane, rather than primarily with faith. This reflects the dual nature of Dragon Communion, incantations themselves, which require both faith and arcane to cast. Most incantations are faith exclusive. They are prayers, devotion made tangible. Dragon Communion incantations are different. They require arcane because what you are doing is not praying to a dragon. You are carrying its essence inside you. The arcane stat in Elden Ring governs discovery, secrets, and, crucially, the hidden vitality of the blood. It is the stat of things that run deeper than surface knowledge. Channeling dragon power requires something more personal than faith. You are not asking a dragon to lend you its fire. You are tapping into the fire that has already become part of you. The fire giant incantations and the last of their kind. The fire giant, who guards the forge of the giants on the mountaintops, is the last of his species. An ancient race of towering beings who once battled the armies of the Erdtree in a war so catastrophic it left scorch marks on mountain ranges. The fire giant, incantations, giant's flame, take thee, flame of the fell god, fire's deadly sin, surge o flame, whirl o flame, are not human magic channeled from a cosmic source. They are the residual power of a culture that was nearly annihilated. Giant's flame, take thee, summons fire that burns with genuine hatred, a great column of flame that comes down from above with the weight of a culture's grief behind it. Flame of the fell god, one of the 3 legendary incantations required for the achievement, calls down a colossal ball of flame from the sky that bounces and explodes, carrying the primal fire of a god the giants once served before the war took everything. Fire's deadly sin and the inverse prayer. Among the fire giant incantations, fire's deadly sin is one of the most unusual in concept. Rather than targeting an enemy, it causes flames to erupt from the caster's own body, burning yourself and everything around you simultaneously. It is a massive area of effect self-immolation that deals fire damage in all directions. In a conventional religious context, a deadly sin is a transgression. Here, the transgression is the fire itself, a reckless, indiscriminate burning that harms the caster as much as anyone else. The giants' warfare was not precise. It was not tactical. It was the expression of a species fighting with everything they had against an enemy they could not ultimately overcome. Fire's deadly sin is the incantation equivalent of throwing yourself into the enemy, weapons blazing, knowing it will cost you. It is the magic of a people who burn their world rather than surrender it. The fell god and what was sealed in the giants. The flame of the fell god. Incantation's description connects it to a deity worshipped by the fire giants that no longer has a name in the current age. The fell god, whose flame this spell channels, was the giants' divine patron, the entity they served and drew fire from in their war against the Erd Tree. After the war against the giants ended and the last fire giant was hobbled and chained to the forge as a living key, this deity was apparently locked away or destroyed along with the giants' civilization. Flame of the Fell God is identified as a legendary incantation, one of only 3 in the entire base game, because it contains power that has no living tradition, no church, no followers. It is divine fire that belongs to a dead religion, inherited by the tarnished, who finds it in a world that barely remembers why the giants burned. The Rot Servant incantations and Scarlet Rot as theology. The servants of Rot incantations, Pest Threads, Scarlet Aeonia, Rotten Breath, Exike's Decay, are not simply poison damage spells. They are expressions of a specific theological understanding of Scarlet Rot as a force of transformation and renewal rather than corruption and death. In the same way that the frenzied flame believes suffering can be ended by dissolving individuality, the servants of Rot understand the Rot as something that breaks down the old to make way for the new. Millennia's Scarlet Rot is inseparable from her grace. The power that makes her the blade of Miquella, the champion of a god, is the same Rot that has been consuming her since before she could walk. The servants of Rot who follow her do not see the Rot as her curse. They see it as her divinity. The Scarlet Aeonia and the Haligtree bloom. Scarlet Aeonia is one of the most lore-resonant incantations in the game. When cast, the Tarnished leaps into the air and descends in a scarlet explosion, leaving a flower of scarlet rot blooming on the ground at the point of impact. The Aeonia flower appears in Malenia's name. Malenia, Blade of Miquella, is also known as the Aeonian goddess of Rot. When she descended in the Scarlet Aeonia attack during the Shattering, the clash between her and Starscourge Radan, her landing devastated Caelid, leaving the rot-soaked wasteland that persists throughout the game. The incantation is a recreation of that moment. Every time the Tarnished casts Scarlet Aeonia, they are replicating the single most destructive act of divine battle in recent Elden Ring history. A goddess landing in a field and blooming with a rot that erased an entire region from fertility. Exike's decay and the disease that spread through the sky. Decaying Exix is a dragon found in Caelid, visibly afflicted with scarlet rot, the large patches of corruption blooming across his body marking him as something that has absorbed the disaster of the Shattering. His incantation, Exike's Decay, is the enhanced version of Rotten Breath. Rather than a forward gust, Exike's launches the rot in an arc from above, covering a wide area below with the decaying mist. The fact that a dragon has been afflicted with Malenia's rot is significant. The rot spread during the Shattering was not limited to the ground. The battle between Malenia and Radan was so catastrophically devastating that the scarlet rot contaminated the very air over Kaleed, reaching creatures that had nothing to do with the war. Exix is collateral, an ancient creature caught in the fallout of a conflict between demigods who chose a battlefield far from anything he cared about. Pest threads and the ugliness of affliction. The pest thread incantations. Pest threads in the base game. Pest thread spears in the shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Conjure dozens of whipping filaments of scarlet rot that radiate outward from the caster, dealing rapid damage to anything in close range. The visual effect is deeply unsettling. Dozens of thin, organic-looking threads that pulse and writhe. The incantation's description identifies these threads as belonging to the pests. Those small, crawling creatures covered in eyeballs that appear in areas of extreme rot saturation. The pests are themselves creatures that have adapted to scarlet rot so thoroughly that their bodies incorporate it as a structural feature. Pest threads is the magical equivalent of unleashing the defense mechanism of a creature that has learned to live inside a disease, taking the horrifying adaptation of something that should be dead and turning it into an offensive tool. The servants of rot and the fungal transformation. The enemies classified as servants of rot throughout the game. The fungal growth-covered warriors in Kaleed and the surrounding rot-afflicted regions present a progression of what happens when a person fully embraces the scarlet rot rather than fighting it. The initial stages are the walking dead with mushrooms growing from their flesh. The advanced stages are barely recognizable as human anymore. Beings that have become more rot than person, their bodies restructured around the fungal colonization. Scarlet Aeonia's description refers to Millennia as an Ionian goddess, and Ionia suggests something blooming from decay, the flower that grows in ruin. The servants of rot are practicing this transformation intentionally, finding in the rot a kind of becoming that the Golden Order never offered them. Not eternal life under the Erdtree, but eternal transformation, continual rebirth through dissolution. Brother Corin, the most devoted of teachers. Brother Corin is the first incantation vendor most players encounter. A cheerful, optimistic cleric who sits in the round table hold and sells basic Erdtree and Golden Order incantations with genuine enthusiasm. His questline is one of the quieter tragedies in Elden Ring. He becomes increasingly devoted to a cause he does not fully understand. The study of the fundamentalism text, the search for the theorem Goldmask, is trying to prove. The hope that perfect understanding of the Golden Order's laws will deliver enlightenment. His arc ends in the most understated way. Corin follows Goldmask to the Altus Plateau, loses him to a vision of golden transcendence that Corin himself cannot share, and is found alone and bereft afterward. His cheerful certainty converted into a quieter kind of sorrow. The incantations he sells, from basic heal to law of regression, trace the ascending ambition of a man who simply wanted to understand the world and found that understanding it did not make it easier to live in. Miriel, pastor of vows, and the keeper of both schools. Miriel is a giant tortoise who has sat in the Church of Vows on the eastern coast of Leonia for so long that the church seems to have grown around him. He accepts prayer books and scrolls with equal courtesy. The holy texts of Erdtree incantations and the arcane texts of Leonian sorceries, both received with the same gentle, patient enthusiasm. He is, in the law, a creature devoted to the principle that all knowledge deserves preservation, that the separation between incantations and sorceries, between faith magic and intelligence magic, is a political distinction rather than a fundamental one. The Church of Vows is dedicated to the Erdtree, and Miriel is its pastor, and yet he will happily teach the tarnished sorceries from an enemy academy without any apparent philosophical conflict. He has been here longer than the current wars. He expects to be here after them. The Divine Tower of Caelid and what it protects. At the base of the Divine Tower of Caelid, inside a sealed dungeon accessible only by entering from the tower's underground approach, a godskin apostle guards the Godslayer's greatsword, the sacred weapon of the gloam-eyed queen. This is not an accident of level design. The Godslayer's greatsword is described as the weapon through which the gloam-eyed queen channeled the black flames. And a godskin apostle, her spiritual descendant, has been left as its eternal guardian. The tower itself, though its activation mechanism is part of restoring a fractured great rune, sits in the middle of Caelid, the most devastated region in the game, the landscape that millennia's rot and Radan's gravity magic jointly destroyed. What was once a seat of divine power now presides over ruin, guarded by a creature loyal to a queen who predates even the current definition of divine. The two fingers and the hierarchy of holy incantations. The incantations sold by Brother Corin and described as belonging to the two fingers faithful: heal, urgent heal, cure poison, rejection, and others, represent the most institutional face of faith magic in Elden Ring. The two fingers are not a philosophical construct. They are physical entities, enormous severed finger-like beings that serve as communication relays between the greater will and the chosen candidates for Elden Lord. Their incantations reflect this servile practical orientation. Heal does not just heal. Its description reads, "The two fingers has high hopes for the tarnished, that even if they should be wounded, even should they fall, they will continue to fight for their duty." Every incantation in this category carries that framing. The spells are not the tarnished's power. They are tools issued by a cosmic hierarchy to an employee who is expected to keep working. The sacred seals are weapons with hidden specificity. One of the most overlooked layers of incantation design in Elden Ring is how specifically sacred seals are calibrated to their schools. The finger seal, which is the default catalyst for two fingers incantations, does not boost two fingers incantations, a detail so counterintuitive that the Fextralife wiki calls attention to it explicitly. The Erdtree seal, shaped from the divine wood of the Erdtree itself, does not boost Erdtree or Erdtree worship incantations. The Dragon Communion seal boosts Dragon Communion incantations. The Clawmark seal boosts bestial incantations. The Gravel Stone seal boosts Dragon Cult incantations. The logic of each seal is tied to its material and maker rather than its name. Each school of incantation magic has a specific sacred object that amplifies it, and finding which seal belongs to which tradition is itself a form of lore research. A question about who made this object and what they understood about the power they were shaping. The Bloodflame incantations and the Formless Mother. The Bloodflame incantations, Bloodflame Blade, Bloodflame Talons, Catch Flame boosted by blood, are tied to Mog, Lord of Blood, and the outer god he serves, the Formless Mother. Unlike most outer gods who appear in the game's lore through extensive references, the Formless Mother has almost no direct characterization. She appears by name on the Mogwin Sacred Spear's description, Mog's primary weapon, and in the context of his Bloodflame rituals. What is known is that the Formless Mother is a being associated with blood, with the power of a living body's most fundamental fluid, and that the incantations tied to her tradition weaponize hemorrhage and the burning, ignition of blood as a magical force, blood that catches fire. blood that reaches with taloned fingers, blood as an act of worship. The formless mother is never shown, never explained, and her incantations are among the most viscerally disturbing in the game. The frenzied flame's connection to the merchants is cut content. One of the most significant pieces of missing context in Elden Ring involves the merchants and the frenzied flame, and it was removed before release. Cut content indicates that a quest would have been given by Merchant Kale in the Church of Elden, involving the search for the great caravan of nomadic merchants who were buried alive beneath the capital for their heretical beliefs. In the final game, you find their corpses in the subterranean shunning grounds, a few survivors playing instruments in the dark, the description of their fate preserved in item text. Kale's quest would have provided direct narrative context for why the frenzied flame is connected to these outsiders, these wanderers who existed on the margins of Erdtree civilization. The cut quest would have told a story about what happens to people who the Golden Order excludes. People who go underground, literally and metaphorically, and find something in the dark that answers them. The incantations still carry this backstory. The quest to discover it simply was never finished. The messenger from Shabriri's Woe, the Shabriri's Woe talisman, which continuously attracts enemy aggression to the wearer, contains the most complete account of Shabriri's origin. Disturbing likeness of a man whose eyes have been gouged out. The corners of his mouth are upturned in an almost flirtatious manner. Constantly attracts enemies' aggression. It is said that the man, named Shabriri, had his eyes gouged out as punishment for the crime of slander, and with time, the blight of the flame of frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets. What this talisman reveals is that Shabriri's expression, that unsettling almost smile, the upturned corners of the mouth, was permanent, present even as his eyes were removed, present as the flame moved in. He was punished for speaking against something powerful, had his eyes destroyed as consequence, and then became, not in spite of this, but perhaps because of it, the most powerful vector the frenzied flame had ever found. His smile never changed. The flame just filled the space where his sight had been. The incantations that cause madness in the caster. A meaningful cluster of frenzied flame incantations cause madness. Build up not just in enemies, but in the caster themselves. Howl of Shabriri, when used, triggers the caster's own madness meter. The yellowing of their own vision, the encroaching loss of self. The gameplay reason for this is to allow synergy with talismans that boost damage when the user's madness status activates. But the lore reason is simply that the frenzied flame has never made a distinction between the tool and the target. Every weapon the Three Fingers offers does something to the wielder at the same time as it does something to the enemy. You cannot channel the frenzied flame without becoming, in some small way, its expression. The caster and the cast upon are not separate. The flame simply does not recognize the line between them. The fire monks were warriors before they were clergy. The flame monk incantations, O flame, surge O flame, whirl O flame, catch flame, flame sling, represent a magical tradition tied not to the Erdtree or the Golden Order, but to the primal fire atop the mountaintops of the giants, the forge that requires a living sacrifice to light. The fire monks were originally warriors who tended this flame, not priests in the theological sense, but guardians in the military sense, keepers of something dangerous that the world required to be contained and ready. Their incantations are simple, direct and violent. Fire thrown, fire poured, fire shaped into a whip. They lack the cosmic grandeur of the Elden stars or the philosophical weight of the Golden Order. They are practitioners of a functional religion, soldiers of a sacred fire who know their duty is physical rather than theological. Some of them, seduced by the elegance of the Godskin Apostles' black flame, abandoned that duty entirely, and the ones who remained hate them for it. The flame of frenzy and the eyes that burn. Among all the visual effects in Elden Ring's Incantation school, the frenzied flame's signature imagery, the yellow fire that erupts from the caster's eyes and spreads in a wide arc, is one of the most recognizable. The basic spell, the Flame of Frenzy, fires multiple orbs of yellow madness flame that spread outward from the caster's eyes in a short-range burst. Its upgraded counterpart, Frenzied Burst, concentrates that same force into twin beams of searing yellow fire that fire from the eyes at long range with enough power to penetrate an enemy's guard entirely. Both spells cause madness build up in the caster as well as the target. The description for Frenzied Burst captures what both spells represent. In times past, every single person who attempted to control the Flame of Frenzy succumbed to madness after a desperate internal struggle. This incantation is testament to a meager victory. A meager victory, not mastery, not control. The spell exists as evidence that someone somewhere managed to express the frenzied flame through their eyes without immediately dissolving into complete madness, and that this partial resistance, this slight delay of the inevitable, was considered significant enough to preserve as a teachable weapon. Everyone who has ever cast either of these spells is fighting the same internal war as every wielder before them. The game tells you this. It does not tell you who won. The Crucible's flame aspect and the dragon ancestry of fire. The aspects of the Crucible, breath incantation, which creates a burst of fire from the caster's throat in a manner reminiscent of a dragon's breath attack, implicitly argues something about the nature of fire in the lands between. All fire is the Crucible's fire, in the sense that fire breath is a primordial life trait that predates any specific application of it. The fire monk's flame, the giant's primal flame, the dragon's breath, the frenzied flame's yellow fire. These are not separate inventions. They are variations on something that was in the Crucible from the beginning, accessible to any form of life that the primordial soup decided should have it. The aspects of the Crucible. Breath incantation is the oldest version of this. Fire not as a weapon system or a religious implement, but as a body part, an ancient thing that life had before it had anything else. The Gloam-eyed Queen's hidden identity. The Gloam-eyed Queen is one of the most tantalizing mysteries woven through every black flame incantation description. A figure mentioned in whispers and fragments, but never shown, never named beyond her title. What the lore pieces together is quietly staggering. She was an Empyrean, chosen by the Two Fingers, just as Ranni and Miquella were chosen. A being with the latent potential to ascend to godhood and reshape the lands between. But unlike those demigods who bent toward the Golden Order's hierarchy, the Gloam-eyed Queen turned against it entirely. She gathered the Godskin Apostles and nobles around her like a dark congregation and led them on what could only be called a god hunt, a crusade through the divine architecture of the lands between, burning gods and demigods with black flame that carried the weight of destined death itself. Mariketh ultimately defeated her on Marika's orders, and with her defeat, Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring and handed it to Malekith for safekeeping. The Golden Order was born the moment she fell. The tragedy is that she has no grave marker, no final resting place confirmed in lore, and no face. Only the echo of her flame, weakened, hollowed out, still burning in the hands of the Godskins who outlived her. the percentage-based death mechanic. Every black flame incantation in the game carries a hidden quality that sets it apart from virtually every other damage type in the lands between. When black flame strikes a target, it does not simply deal a fixed amount of fire damage. It burns away a percentage of the target's maximum health. That phrase, maximum health, is the key. It means that the larger and more powerful the boss, the more devastating each black flame tick becomes. Bosses with enormous health pools, Radagon, Melania, the Elden Beast, are disproportionately harmed by black flame in ways that straightforward elemental spells simply cannot replicate at the same investment level. The mechanic is a direct lore echo of its original purpose. The flame was designed to slay gods, and gods by nature are imbued with more life than mortals. Black flame was the great equalizer. Its percentage damage is the designer's way of encoding that ancient purpose into the very arithmetic of battle. Every black flame fireball you throw at a massive boss is, in a small way, doing exactly what the Glowmide Queen intended. The Godskin Prayer Book's secret location, the entry point into black flame incantations, is a modest item called the Godskin Prayer Book, and the From Software designers tucked it away with characteristic mischief. In Stormveil Castle, one of the very first legacy dungeons players encounter, there is a fog wall sealed shut with an imp statue, requiring a stone sword key to open. Behind it, past rats and decay, is a small room containing both the Godskin Prayer Book and a Godslayer seal. Most players, rushing through Stormveil on their way to Godric, walk right past it without ever knowing. Inside the prayer book are the foundational black flame spells, black flame itself, which hurls a burning orb that deals that precious percentage damage, and black flame blade, which coats a weapon in the heretical fire. The fact that this prayer book aligned with a faction that waged war against the Divine Order, sits hidden inside a castle that belongs to one of Marika's own Elden Lord lineages, is a detail that cuts quietly against the world's official history. The Scouring Black Flame and the Dancing Festival, the Scouring Black Flame Incantation, which sweeps a wide curtain of fire across the battlefield, is dropped by the Godskin Apostle standing at the top of Dominilla Windmill Village, a location that already radiates an eerie, wrong kind of joy. Dominilla is a village of women who dance endlessly around bonfires beneath windmills that turn in perpetual winds, celebrating what is implied to be a festival of sacrifice and fire worship. The Godskin Apostle presiding over this celebration treats the whole affair with a cultish calm. Defeating it yields the spell, but the atmosphere of the encounter lingers. Here is a servant of destined death, attending a village ritual of flame worship, as though even in their diminished state, the apostles are drawn to places where fire and mortality intersect. The incantation itself becomes something darker once you understand what you've stepped into to claim it. The Black Flame Monk's Defection. Before the Black Flame Ritual Incantation was a player-usable spell. It was a piece of history. The lore of the Black Flame Monks explains how a faction of fire monks, the same keepers of the Giant's Flame who guarded the forge at the top of the mountaintops, became enchanted by the Black Flame after the war against the Giants. Their duty was to maintain the Giant's sacred fire, but when they encountered the Glowmide Queen and her Godskin Apostles, they defected. They abandoned the Giant's Flame and joined the God Hunt, pledging themselves to the Dark Coalition. These Black Flame monks are a living record of a divided faith, beings who held one sacred fire and traded it for another. They appear throughout Elden Ring's mid-game as enemies wearing tattered robes and wielding black flame with a fervor that speaks to generations of devotion to a fallen queen. Their presence near the mountaintops of giants, where both the giant's flame and the legacy of the god Hunt echo together, is a geography that resonates deeply once you know what you're walking through. The Noble Presence Incantation. The Noble Presence spell, dropped by the Godskin Noble at Volcano Manor, is one of the more unusual combat incantations in the game. When cast, the Godskin Noble's body ripples outward in a shockwave of black flame presence, knocking enemies back with its sheer divine affront. The spell description notes that nobles claimed noble presence during their god hunt, that the act of proclaiming oneself above gods was itself a kind of power. It is an incantation about identity as much as damage. The Godskin Nobles, described as the most ancient of the apostles, are said to have assimilated inhuman physiology, not unlike the Crucible, meaning their serpentine flexibility and bloated rolling forms are a kind of primordial physical expression of that deep connection to death magic. The Noble Presence spell, therefore, is an avatar of that transformation, a body announcing its own terrible nature to the world. The Black Flame Ritual's double cast trick. The Black Flame Ritual incantation, the ring of black fire pillars that erupts around the caster, has a rarely mentioned mechanical quirk that rewards patient players. When you cast the spell a second time before the first ring fully expires, both rings remain active simultaneously. The damage from two overlapping rings can annihilate large bosses that wander through both circles, doubling the percentage-based HP drain. For massive targets like trolls or wide-bodied dragon bosses, this creates a zone of sustained fire that chips away at health bars with quiet, grinding efficiency. The designers almost certainly intended the spell to be a defensive deterrent, a wall of fire that warns enemies to stay back. But the stacking behavior turns it into a patient, deadly ambush for anything large enough to fill the space. The Spirit Caller Snail and the twin Godskins. The Black Flame Ritual. Incantation is guarded by a Spirit Caller Snail deep in a cave on the mountaintops of giants, a creature that presents what is arguably the cruelest fight arrangement in the base game. The snail summons not one, but two Godskin enemies simultaneously. A Godskin Apostle and a Godskin Noble fighting in concert. Both use their full moveset, both can hit you from different angles, and the snail itself continues summoning if you don't find and kill it, while managing both enemies. The lore reason for the snail's choice of summons is quietly pointed. It calls the spirits of the Glomide Queen's most devoted followers to guard her most advanced incantation. It is a Tombkeeper arrangement, a final guardian system built around the memory of a fallen godslayer. The Godskin Swaddling Cloth, the cloth in which the Queen swaddled her infant apostles, is also found here. It is among the most emotionally specific item locations in the game. The Crucible incantations and the primordial Erd Tree. Shifting now from black flame to golden fire. The aspects of the Crucible incantations carry one of the most quietly beautiful lore concepts in all of Elden Ring. The Crucible is the name for the Erd Tree's primordial state, a time before the Golden Order codified what was acceptable in nature and what was not. In those ancient days, life was experimental. Creatures were neither fully beast nor fully human. Dragons shared breath and blood with men. The Crucible was the original roiling source of all life, undifferentiated and untamed. The incantations that draw from the Crucible, tail, horns, breath, paw, and the others, conjure forth those ancient animalistic features directly onto the caster's body. A great sweeping tail, horns that gore with sacred force, a breath that recalls primordial predation. Each one is a literal reaching back into a moment before the Erd Tree decided that life needed to be categorized. The Crucible Knights as living relics. The Crucible Knights, the enemies who drop the aspects of the Crucible incantations, are not simply armored warriors. They are living fossils of the age of the Crucible. Soldiers who retained their connection to that primordial life force long after the Golden Order deemed it heretical. Their armor bears the sigils of the Crucible. Their bodies carry the residual memory of the age. Every Crucible Knight you fight in an Evergirl is a being who refused to be modernized by Marika's Golden Order, who held onto the older way of being alive. Defeating them and inheriting their incantations is, in a sense, appropriating that resistance, taking on the animal nature of an earlier age and wielding it against the enemies of the present one. It is worth noting that all aspects of the Crucible incantations also count as Erd Tree incantations for the purpose of receiving bonuses from the Crucible armor sets, which is a mechanical acknowledgement that the Crucible and the Erd Tree are, at root, the same growing thing. The Crucible Axe Set's stacking bonus. Each piece of the Crucible Axe Set and the Crucible Tree Set provides a 3.5% boost to aspects of the Crucible incantations when worn. A full set of 4 pieces delivers a 14% total increase in damage and effectiveness, a significant boost that rewards thematic commitment. This kind of armor to incantation bonding is relatively rare in Elden Ring. Most armor is valued purely for its damage negation, weight, and poise values. The Crucible sets are one of the few armor systems in the game that actively encourage you to dress for your magic, to wear the livery of an ancient faction as a functional extension of your spellcasting identity. It makes the Crucible Knight the rarest kind of enemy, one whose gear and spells form a single coherent design philosophy from a long-dead age. The Elden Stars incantation and the Greater Will's first act. Elden Stars is one of the 3 legendary incantations required to earn the corresponding achievement, and its description reads like a creation myth, compressed into a single item tooltip. It describes how the Greater Will once sent a golden star bearing a beast to the lands between. This star was the original seeding act, the moment the Greater Will planted its influence in the world like a farmer sowing a field. The beast within the star was the Elden Beast itself. The spell summons a swarm of golden microstars that trail toward enemies in a slow-moving, continuous stream. And while its raw damage is modest enough to earn it the reputation of being one of the weaker legendary incantations in practice, its lore weight is extraordinary. You are reproducing, in miniature, in a single cast, the original cosmological event that made the lands between what they are. Every time someone casts Elden Stars and watches those pale golden points drift across the air, they are reenacting the birth of the world. The Elden Stars acquisition and the deepest roots. Finding Elden Stars requires journeying into one of the game's most hidden underground regions. The incantation is located in a cave in the Deeproot depths, the vast underground realm at the base of the Erd Tree's root system. To reach it, you must travel through the underground ant-filled cavern that branches east from the great waterfall crest Grace, following a path most players never discover on their own. The cave at the end contains the spell sitting on a corpse, as though someone carried this cosmic secret to their death in the darkness beneath the world's holiest tree. The symbolism of the Greater Will's original seeding act being hidden at the base of the Erd Tree's deepest roots, as if the spell literally grew up from the ground, is the kind of environmental storytelling that from software embeds into geography itself. The Flame of the Fell God. Among the giant's flame incantations, the Flame of the Fell God occupies a position of apocalyptic singularity. It summons an enormous fireball, not a quick conjured sphere, but a slow, blooming mass of ancient giant's fire that crashes down and explodes in an enormous radius. Its description names the Fell God directly, a nameless deity of fire associated with the giants, an entity described as malformed, with curled horns and thick braids of bright red hair, connected also to smithing and the verdigris that accumulates on ancient metal. This god was the spiritual patron of the fire giants, and the flame that Marika commanded to burn the Erd-tree at the forge of the giants is this same flame. The fire that was supposed to be a weapon against the Erd-tree, used as an instrument of the Golden Order's collapse. The Flame of the Fell God is one of the 3 legendary incantations, and its acquisition requires defeating Adan, Thief of Fire, a humanoid boss who stole this divine incantation and for whom an entire questline backstory is implied in a single item description. The giant's flame connection to the mountaintop. The fire giant, the towering multi-limbed creature that guards the forge of the giants, is not simply a boss. He is the last of his kind, the sole survivor of a war Marika won against his people. His body carries that history visibly. 2 of his fingers and toes on his left side are blackened, possibly burned or cursed by destined death in the Night of Black Knives incident, or by some artifact of the war, depending on which theory you follow. The fire giant uses incantation-style fire magic that draws directly from the same source as the giant's flame incantations the player can acquire. When you fight him and then stand at the forge of the giants afterward, you are completing a circuit that the incantations describe, inheriting the fire of a conquered people and using it to burn the very tree those conquerors swore to protect. The giant's flame. Take the incantation. A massive 2-handed column of ancient flame is a piece of this legacy made usable. The Fire Knight's seal and Messmer's incantation boost. In Shadow of the Erd-tree, the Fire Knight's seal is the dedicated catalyst for Messmer's flame incantations, providing a scaling bonus that increases their effectiveness when the seal is held in an active hand. And a second seal, held in the offhand, stacks another bonus on top. Wearing Messmer's helm provides an additional 3% boost, and the Fire Knight armor adds 4% on top of that. What this means in practical terms is that to get the most out of Messmer's incantations, you essentially dress like one of his knights. You wear the livery of his army and wield the seal associated with his flame. The game is asking you to cosplay as a devotee of a forgotten prince to access his fire at full power, which is either immersive design or efficient mnemonic, depending on how generous you feel. The tragedy inside Messmer's orb. The description of Messmer's orb, the remembrance reward from the boss himself, contains one of the most quietly devastating lines in the entire game. It reads, "Messmer despised his own fire. Time and time again he hoped to rid himself of it, but ever did it burn." That sentence, read against the context of Messmer the Impaler's full story, a son cast out by his mother Marika, sent to the land of shadow to lead a hidden purge and then forgotten, transforms the incantation's visual spectacle into something deeply mournful. The giant orbiting fireball you hurl at enemies is the personal curse of a man who never wanted it, fire he tried over and over to extinguish and couldn't. The act of learning and casting it after defeating him means the player inherits that self-loathing flame, takes it from his hands and carries it forward. from software rarely lets power be uncomplicated, and Messmer's orb is one of the starkest examples of that tendency. The Fire Serpent's hidden location. Fire Serpent, one of the 3 Messmer flame incantations, is not found on a boss or in a treasure chest in any obvious room. Reaching it requires one of the most elaborate detours in the entire DLC. From the storehouse back section Grace, there is a ladder on a nearby balcony. Climb it, pass a Fire Knight staring out a window, take the stairs, and on a small corpse-laden balcony at the far end lies the spell. But reaching that specific Grace in the first place requires going from Morth Ruins through Bonnie Village, through the church district, then taking an underground elevator that circles back to the storehouse from below. A path that many players never discover because it requires abandoning the most obvious forward route and backtracking through a hidden architectural loop. The Incantation's description states that when Messmer's fire could not take root in the Fire Knights themselves, they used this spell to honor their bond with him anyway. It is a spell about wanting to carry a flame you were never given. The Rain of Fire spell and the bridge fight, Rain of Fire, the 3rd Messmer incantation, is found by defeating a Fire Knight at the end of a bridge after the West Rampart Grace in Shadow Keep. The fight itself is appropriately brutal. Fire Knights in Shadow of the Erd Tree are among the most aggressive humanoid enemies in the DLC, with relentless pressure and flame-enhanced attacks. But the reward is an incantation that showers the battlefield in descending streaks of Messmer's fire from above, a spell that turns the sky itself into a burning delivery system. In large, open encounters against slow or stationary enemies, Rain of Fire is visually one of the most dramatic spells in the game. The kind of thing that makes you stop and stare the first time you use it in a wide arena. It carries no healing, no self-damage, no dramatic cost. It is simply fire from above, which is in many ways the most honest thing about Messmer's legacy. The Frenzied Flame Seal's unusual scaling. The Frenzied Flame Seal. Obtained at the end of Hietta's questline when she is consumed by the 3 fingers, is the only sacred seal in the game that scales across all 5 main attributes: strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and mind. Every point in any of these stats contributes to its scaling, though faith contributes the most meaningfully. What this makes it is a deeply egalitarian catalyst, reflecting the Frenzied Flame's own philosophical position. All life was once the one great. All divisions are errors. All distinctions are illusions. The greater will, manufactured. A seal that benefits from all stats equally refuses the hierarchy of build optimization. It is the magical artifact of an outer god that believes specialization itself is a kind of wound. The Frenzied Flame Seal is also the strongest booster for Frenzied Flame incantations specifically, raising their damage by 20% while held. A bonus attached to the most destruction-oriented magical school in the game. The Howl of Shabriri and Self-Inflicted Madness. Among the Frenzied Flame incantations, Howl of Shabriri is uniquely self-destructive in a way that most spells avoid. When cast, the character releases a maddening shriek that builds madness in nearby enemies, but it also builds madness in the caster. Using it recklessly or repeatedly will drive your own character toward a madness proc, which deals a chunk of your own health and a massive amount of FP as a penalty. But this self-inflicted madness can be weaponized. The Black Dumpling helmet increases damage by 10% for 60 seconds after suffering a madness proc. The Aged One's Exaltation Talisman increases damage by 20% after madness procs nearby. Players who cycle through Howl of Shabriri's self-inflicted madness deliberately are essentially using their own psychological collapse as a power buff, channeling Shabriri's worldview that the path through suffering is the path to strength. It is uncomfortable, thematically perfect design. The Three Fingers philosophical argument. When Hieta finally reaches the Three Fingers and the Tarnished inherits the Frenzied Flame, she relays the Three Fingers message. The most complete theological argument the Frenzied Flame makes for its own existence. She says that all life came from the One Great, that the greater will divided it into individual souls and called this progress, but that every sin and every suffering emerged from that fracture. The Frenzied Flame's goal is not destruction for its own sake, but reunion. The melting of all separateness back into the original unified state. It is nihilism reframed as mercy. Burning the lands between is not murder. It is healing the wound of individuality. Whether you find that persuasive depends entirely on whether you think the alternative, a world maintained by a distant, controlling cosmic will, is worth preserving. Elden Ring does not answer that question. It only presents the debate in full, through incantations and quest lines and burning eyes. The Frenzied Burst Sniper Incantation. Frenzied Burst is widely considered the most practically powerful of the Frenzied Flame incantations for reasons that have nothing to do with its lore. It fires a thin, high-velocity beam of yellow flame from the caster's eyes at long range, dealing significant fire damage and building madness in the target from a distance. In player versus player combat, it became notorious for its combination of range, speed, and madness accumulation. Against tough bosses that don't move much, it hits reliably and repeatedly. The incantation is found near the Frenzied Flame village in Liurnia, dropped by a teardrop scarab. And that village, a settlement of maddened inhabitants whose yellow burning eyes mark the Frenzied Flame's infection, is the atmospheric prelude to the spell you're about to acquire. Frenzied Burst is a spell that makes literal what the Three Fingers promise, that the flame sees through you, sees clearly, and fires with perfect accuracy. The Cut Merchant questline connection. The connection between the Frenzied Flame and the nomadic merchants is one of the most evocative pieces of cut content in From Software's recent history. Almost all nomadic merchants, those robed wanderers selling goods throughout the lands between, use Frenzied Flame incantations if you attack them. Their item drops after death are ball bearings that unlock their shop inventory through the twin maiden husks at the Round Table Hold. Their clothing descriptions speak of a great caravan that was buried alive for heretical beliefs, after which they summoned the Flame of Frenzy underground. Merchant Kale was supposed to have a quest line about discovering what happened to the great caravan, but that quest was cut before release. What remains is a ghost of that narrative. Wandering merchants who carry the Frenzied Flame's knowledge beneath their hoods, who die using it, who were perhaps the first mortal conduits before Shabriri turned into the Flame's primary face. The Frenzied Flame incantations exist in a world where this history almost got told. The Unendurable Frenzy and the Consecrated Snowfields. Unendurable Frenzy, the most sustained of the Frenzied Flame incantations, a continuous burst of yellow fire that empties the air in front of the caster, is found in a chest deep underground at Yellow Annex ruins in the Consecrated Snowfields. The Consecrated Snowfields are themselves one of the most difficult areas to reach in the base game, requiring both halves of the Haligtree's secret medallion and the grand lift of Rold's hidden path. The fact that one of the most powerful Frenzied Flame spells is buried in such a remote location, past Niles Castle, past the snowfield Albinorix, past the ruins, speaks to how deeply the game hides the flame's most extreme expressions. Unendurable Frenzy is not meant to be found casually. It is a reward for committing to the cold, to the long way, to the path that the Golden Order would never have mapped for you. The Vike tragedy and the Church of Inhibition. The Church of Inhibition in northwestern Liurnia is the home of one of the game's most layered backstories. A tower nearby continuously broadcasts a frenzied flame signal that inflicts escalating madness on anyone who approaches. The church itself is guarded by festering fingerprint Vike, an invader who, like the Tarnished, was once a Tarnished champion. Once close to becoming Elden Lord, Vike descended below the capital and was marked by the Three Fingers, branded by the frenzied flame in an attempt to save his Finger Maiden. He never recovered. By the time you fight him, his eyes burn yellow and his armor is warped by the flame's influence. Defeating him drops the fingerprint grape needed for Hyeta's quest, making Vike's personal tragedy a literal ingredient in the path toward the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. His story is a warning written in advance about the ending Hyeta is guiding you toward. The Blood Boon and the Formless Mother's Body. The Incantation. Blood Boon contains one of the most viscerally strange action descriptions in the game. When cast, your character thrusts their arm into the body of the Formless Mother, the outer god of blood and wounds who exists somewhere outside physical space, and scatters her blood, which ignites as blood flame, across the ground in front of you. The Formless Mother is described as omnipresent. She can be pierced from anywhere in the lands between using a ritual spear or apparently a bare arm. She does not resist. She craves wounds. The act of stabbing her and spreading her burning blood is experienced by this entity not as an assault, but as an offering reciprocated. You wound her. She gives you power. The ground burns. It is a transaction sealed in suffering, and the incantation's cast animation, that moment where your character reaches into empty space and finds something, is one of the most quietly unsettling visual moments in the game. The Formless Mother's Eternal Blood. An item description in Elden Ring states that the Formless Mother's blood will never dry or turn to rot. It is eternal blood. Blood that does not decay, does not coagulate, does not become anything other than what it is. This is in direct thematic contrast to the Erd Tree, whose symbolism is cyclical growth and decay, and to Scarlet Rot, which consumes and transforms what it touches. The Formless Mother's domain is wound without closure, bleeding without end. The blood flame that coats Mohg's arsenal, that burns on the ground in pools and sets enemies ablaze while also building hemorrhage, is the physical expression of that endless, undrying bleed. When you fight Mohg and watch the arena slowly fill with burning blood pools in his second phase, you are watching an outer god's aesthetic made into combat design, a world that will not stop bleeding. The Mohg Discovery Underground. The item description of Blood Boon describes the exact moment Mohg became what he is. Deep underground, below Leyndell, below the sewer passages where Omen children were discarded, Mohg stood before the Formless Mother, and his Omen blood erupted into fire. He had always carried the flame of the cursed Omen, but it was dormant, shameful, the mark that had him cast into the sewers alongside his twin Morgoth. When he met the Formless Mother, she did not cure his curse, she completed it. His accursed blood became blood flame. His shame became his dynasty. The Mohgwyn Palace, that sprawling blood-soaked underground kingdom with its Albinoric labor and its pale pilgrims, is the physical monument to what one outer god's approval can do to a discarded prince. Morg's story is inseparable from his incantations. Every blood flame spell is a testament to choosing power over shame. The Blood Flame Talons and the Left Hand Detail. Blood Flame Talons, the incantation that wraps the caster's hand in blood flame and rakes claws across the air, has an obscure visual connection to Mog's own character model. His left hand, examination reveals, appears to have 6 fingers, with the third finger being a stiff, solid claw that emerges when he summons his Blood Flame Talons. That extra claw is not present in his normal animation states. It appears specifically during the Talon summons, from software modelled a physical mutation, a law-visible sign that Mog's communion with the Formless Mother has altered his very body. The Blood Flame Talons incantation that players can acquire, dropped by Mog the Omen, the version of Mog found beneath Leyndell, carries this history in its animation. Your hand rakes the air the way Mog's mutated left hand rakes the battlefield. The swarm of flies in the Blood Marsh. Swarm of flies, arguably the most mechanically oppressive of the blood incantations for its ability to rapidly stack hemorrhage buildup from range, is found on a corpse sitting in a shallow cave on the eastern edge of Mogwyn Palace's Blood Marsh. The Blood Marsh itself is one of the game's most haunting environments. A wide, deep basin filled with slow-moving crimson liquid, littered with pilgrims who have been walking toward Mog's palace and simply stopped. They stand in the blood, arms at their sides, facing nowhere in particular. They are not dead. They are simply overwhelmed. Finding a body holding a powerful blood incantation sitting in a cave. Above this pilgrimage site has a grim poetry. Here is the ultimate gift of the Formless Mother's worship, waiting in the dark above a field of the faithfully ruined. The Furious Blade of Ansbach, the Furious Blade of Ansbach, added in shadow of the Erd Tree, is categorized as a blood oath incantation, and it has the unusual distinction of being one of the only incantations in the game where the depicted figure is clothed. Most incantation sigils feature bare-limbed human forms in dramatic poses. Ansbach's incantation shows a robed figure, which players in the community quickly noticed and commented on. Mechanically, the spell is acquired by completing Sir Ansbach's questline and siding with him against Leda, then claiming it from the arena in Enir after the DLC's final boss. In terms of lore, Ansbach was the commander of Mog's Pureblood Knights, a loyalist to the Blood Lord who nevertheless possesses a scholar's restraint and a deliberate philosophy about power and fidelity. His incantation, being clothed rather than naked, is the visual shorthand for that restraint. The Formless Mother's gifts do not always look the same. The Dragon Communion origin story. Before Dragon Communion was a player mechanic, it was a vendetta. Dragon Lord Placidusax, the ancient, two-headed overlord of Farum Azula, who predates the Golden Order, was attacked by the great Drake Baal the Dread. Their clash ended without a decisive victor. Baal fled, gravely injured, to the Jagged Peak. Placidusax, furious at this transgression, had some of his followers take mortal human forms as priestesses and travel to the lands of men. These priestesses established Dragon Communion. They lured human warriors with the promise of power in exchange for hunting down Baal and his descendant Drakes. The hearts consumed at the altars were Baal's lineage, being systematically culled across generations. By the time the player finds Dragon Communion, its original purpose has been largely forgotten. Practitioners hunt any dragon for the power, not just Baal's bloodline. But the altars still stand. The priestess still waits near the Jagged Peak, and Baal himself is still alive on his peak, an unfinished piece of a very old war. The Draconic Eye transformation. After a player has consumed enough dragon hearts to acquire 4 or more incantations, their characters' eyes permanently transform. The sclera turns black, the iris turns yellow, and the pupils become narrow vertical slits. Draconic eyes. The game does not announce this transformation. You simply look in your character's face one day, and something has changed. If you want to undo it, there is a mirror in Fear's room at the Round Table Hold that restores your original eyes, implying that this change is understood as significant enough to require a deliberate reversal. The Magma Breath Incantation's description makes the endpoint of unrestrained communion explicit. Magma worms, the pitifully winged crawling creatures found throughout the lands between, are described as once human warriors who communed without restraint and lost their humanity entirely. Those burning, belly-crawling monsters are the natural consequence of following the dragon communion path to its end. The rock heart and the ancient original form. In shadow of the Erd Tree, the item called the rock heart unlocks the ancient original form of dragon communion. Using it while unrobed transforms the player's flesh into that of an ancient dragon, and the game notes specifically that the change cannot be undone except by death. This is the primordial dragon communion, the kind practiced before the altars and priestesses formalized it into a trade. The description adds that the last thing the partaker saw with human eyes was a sunset, its colors faded and tarnished. A remote thing from eternity. That is such a specific, lonely detail. Not a dramatic last sight, not a battle or a revelation, but a sunset, something ordinary and fading. The implication is that the practitioner knew exactly what they were giving up and looked at the world one last time before letting it go. The ghost flame breath and death's element. The ghost flame breath incantation, added in Shadow of the Erd Tree, is obtained by defeating a ghost flame dragon and exchanging dragon hearts at the Grand Altar near the Jagged Peak. What makes it remarkable in the context of the Dragon Communion School is that it deals magic damage and builds frostbite. Not fire, not rot, not lightning. It deals the chill of the outer god of death, the spectral cold that the ancient death birds carry in their wings, and the ghost flame dragons breathe in pale blue columns. Dragon Communion typically borrows draconic fire and physical force. Ghost flame breath borrows death itself, filtered through a dragon's ancient lung. It is a reminder that not all dragons drew from the same well. Some were touched by death long before the Night of Black, knives, and the communion of their hearts gives access to something older and colder than flame. The Bale's flame, lightning origin. Bale the Dread, the final target of Placidusax's ancient commission, is a creature unlike ordinary drakes. He is the great rebel, the descendant dragon who fled the Dragon Lord's wrath and survived for uncounted ages on the Jagged Peak, growing into something monstrous and scorching. Bale's incantations, Bale's flame lightning, and Bale's tyranny have high arcane requirements rather than faith. Different from virtually all other Dragon Communion spells, this reflects Bale's position as a dragon outside the communal tradition, a creature that was always the target of the ritual rather than its beneficiary. His flame is specifically lightning aspected, a unique property among dragon breaths that has no base game parallel. The description of Bale's heart notes that even after being consumed, it continues to resist its subjugation. It throbs, it fights back. It warns that the fire inside will eventually consume the communion devourer too. Bale refuses to be mastered even in death. The dragon cult's lightning devotion, distinct from dragon communion, which borrows the raw biological power of dragon hearts. The dragon cult incantations represent an intellectual and spiritual worship of ancient dragons. dragon cult knights and ancients reverenced the great worms of the Old Age and accessed their powers through faith rather than arcane. This is because they are not consuming dragons. They are emulating them through devotion. The lightning spear line, the ancient dragon's lightning strike, Lanciax's glaive. These are the weapons of reverence, not digestion. Lanciax, one of the ancient dragons who still maintains a spectral presence over the Altus Plateau, cast what would become her namesake incantation in mourning for Fortisax, her ancient companion. Dragon cult incantations are therefore prayers to specific dragons, named, remembered, mourned. Dragon communion incantations are something more primal, a consumption and an inheritance. The same source, ancient dragons, gives rise to two entirely different spiritual technologies, the Lanciax glaive and the last ancient. Lanciax's glaive is obtained in one of the game's most atmospheric ways. Players travel to the Altus Plateau and find Lanciax herself, a ghostly ancient dragon whose enormous translucent form hovers at several locations around the plateau, always moving. She is not hostile until approached. When fought and defeated, her remembrance yields the incantation, a sweeping arc of condensed lightning in the shape of her own great wing. Lanciax is one of the last ancient dragons still active in the present age of the game. Her persistent ghostly presence above the plateau is an act of memorial. She hovers over the world that once belonged to dragons, neither fully alive nor fully gone, grieving something the player cannot directly witness. The incantation name for her is therefore also a piece of that grief, an arc of lightning that carries the form of a wing never still, never resting. The law of regression's mechanical surprise. The law of regression incantation is unusual among Golden Order spells, in that it requires 37 intelligence, not faith, to cast. Most incantations need faith. The requirement for intelligence is a deliberately uncomfortable design choice. It forces players pursuing the Gold Mask questline, which is about the deepest possible devotion to the Golden Order, to temporarily reason like a scholar rather than a believer. The incantation's name contains the logic. Law of regression removes magical buffs and debuffs from the caster and everyone nearby, stripping away illusions, enchantments, and disguises. To see through false appearances requires not faith, but rationality. When cast at the statue of Radagon in Lindell, it strips the statue's disguise and reveals the text, "Radagon is Marika," a fact that no amount of faith could have uncovered. The incantation is a story about the limits of devotion and the necessity of inquiry. The Gold Masks sculpt a secret. Miriel, Pastor of Vows, the giant tortoise cleric who knows more history than anyone else in the game, reveals, when asked about the Radagon statue, that it was created by a sculptor hired by Radagon himself. When the sculptor finished the statue, he realized what it meant, that Radagon and Marika were the same being, and Radagon killed him. The sculptor's death was the original act of concealment, the Golden Order's first lie in stone. The law of regression uncovers what that sculptor was killed for knowing. The entire Gold Mask questline is therefore structured as a slow archaeology of this buried truth. Corinne's faith, Gold Mask's intellect, your incantation cast revelation, all converging on a secret that was suppressed with murder centuries before the game begins. The Radagon's Rings of Light and Dual Identity. Radagon's Rings of Light. The boomeranging halo incantation from the Golden Order school was created by Radagon himself during his time as the second Elden Lord. As Marika's consort, Radagon devoted himself to the study of the Golden Order with an academic fervor unusual for a figure of his martial reputation. The Golden Order incantations he developed require both faith and intelligence simultaneously, a reflection of his dual nature. A warrior who was also a theoretician, a god who was also a person, and ultimately a person who was also a god. The Rings of Light incantation bounces between targets, returns to the caster, and can be used in layered sequences to cover a field of enemies in sacred light. That boomerang quality, the rings always returning, carries an inadvertent metaphor about Radagon's whole existence. Always returning, always circling back, never quite free from what he started as. The immutable, shield, and the questline reward. After telling Goldmask the truth that Radagon is Marika, the player receives the Golden Order totality gesture, and Brother Corin makes the Immutable Shield incantation available for purchase. Immutable Shield creates a magical barrier around the caster that significantly increases stability against enemy attacks. In mechanical terms, it is situational, useful in 3 specific scenarios and largely ignored elsewhere. But in lore terms, the path to obtaining it encapsulates everything the questline has been about. You had to find a lost scholar, journey with a devoted but ultimately limited cleric, uncover a dangerous truth about the gods, and report it to someone who cannot speak. The reward for all of that is a shield, a defense, as though knowing the truth about the order that rules you earns you only the ability to endure it, not to escape it. The 2 fingers incantations. Strange exception. There is a mechanical footnote in the incantation system that most players never encounter because it involves a school that few build around. 2 fingers. Incantations are not boosted by the finger seal, the sacred catalyst associated with the 2 fingers themselves. Meanwhile, the Erdtree seal does not boost Erdtree or Erdtree worship incantations. These apparent contradictions in the catalyst system are among the game's more puzzling technical decisions. The most coherent explanation is that the 2 fingers are conduits, not sources. They channel the greater will's power without holding it, so a seal shaped like their form amplifies other divine schools without specifically intensifying the school that draws directly from their conduit function. The finger seal is a universal amplifier that doesn't favor its own symbolic origin, which is either an oversight or the most accurate possible mechanical description of how intermediary divine power works. The aspects of the Crucible tale, hidden depth, the aspects of the Crucible tail incantation, which grows a sweeping draconic tail from the caster and slams it in a wide arc, has a detail that many players miss. The tail persists briefly after the initial sweep, and enemies caught on the return arc take a second hit. In tight corridors or against slow bosses, this creates a double damage window that the incantation's visual appearance does not immediately suggest. The move looks like a single swing. It has the hitbox of 2. This kind of embedded mechanical depth, where lore-rich incantations contain hidden functional nuance, is characteristic of From Software's combat design philosophy. Incantations are not just spell effects slapped onto a cool concept. They are tuned, iterated, layered. The Crucible tail is a sweep that surprises you the first time it catches something on the way back, and a deliberate tool once you understand its geometry. The Watchful Spirit and the Sleeping Maiden. The Watchful Spirit incantation from Shadow of the Erdtree is obtained from a maiden inside a building in the Land of Shadow, who is in a deep, dreamlike stupor. Players cannot wake her through normal interaction. She only stirs when the player approaches wearing the Divine Beast head helmet, the mask associated with the Divine Beast warrior's power. When she wakes, she sees the player's transformed face, recognizes the divine beast's authority, and bestows the watchful spirit as a gift before returning to her mysterious sleep. The incantation summons a guardian spirit that hovers above the caster's head, similar to the Carian phalanx sorcery in behavior, watching for enemies that stray within range. The encounter is among the most gentle in the DLC. A sleeping woman who only wakes for the right face, gives what she has, and goes back to wherever she was. The incantation itself, this watchful hovering presence, feels like a direct extension of her own vigil. The Erdtree Seal's counterintuitive nature. The Erdtree Seal is one of the highest scaling sacred seals in the base game for high faith builds, boosting incantation damage across almost every school. The catch is a counterintuitive exception. It does not boost Erdtree or Erdtree worship incantations, the most powerful physical manifestation of Erdtree devotion. A seal molded in the Erdtree's own image refuses to amplify the spells most directly derived from that same tree. The reason appears to be mechanical balance. Erdtree healing incantations are already potent enough that an additional boost from their most natural catalyst would break the healing economy entirely. But the thematic implication is fascinating. The Erdtree Seal is a symbol of the Golden Order's authority, and Golden Order authority, the game's lore consistently suggests, is more effective at projecting power outward than sustaining itself from within. The Grail's Roar and the Elder Dragon. Grail's Roar is one of the 3 legendary incantations, and its acquisition requires one of the more morally uncomfortable acts available in the open world. Grail, the elder dragon sleeping in the Farum Azula adjacent dragon plateau of Caelid, is surrounded by her smaller dragon children, who patrol protectively around her enormous, motionless body. She cannot attack, she cannot defend herself. She simply sleeps, vast and ancient, while her offspring circle. Players who discover that hitting her directly while her children are occupied or using damage over time effects can bring her down and claim her dragon heart, which can be exchanged for her namesake incantation. Grail's Roar debuffs all enemies in a wide radius, reducing their attack power, and provides the player with significant rune rewards on acquisition. The legendary incantation therefore comes with a moral price the game never comments on. You killed the sleeping grandmother of the dragons. The roar you earn is her voice, taken from her without her waking. The Golden Vow's origin and universal application. Golden Vow is among the most broadly useful incantations in Elden Ring. A buff that raises both attack power and damage negation for the caster and any nearby allies simultaneously for a generous duration. Its description describes it as a vow taken to honor the Erdtree. Not a prayer for strength, but a promise, an act of will rather than petition. The distinction matters because Golden Vow does not require enormous faith investment to be effective. It scales well at accessible stat thresholds, can be cast quickly relative to other buffs, and applies instantly to everyone around you, making it the single most common incantation in cooperative play. Nearly every Tarnished who runs Faith as a secondary stat carries Golden Vow. It is the utility incantation that defines what Faith as support feels like in Elden Ring. Not a dramatic divine intervention, but a quiet promise, honored and honored again, in every encounter where it matters. The Pest Threads, Acquisition and the Envoys. Pest Threads, the incantation that fires a spray of thin, piercing threads that track enemies and accumulate hits rapidly, is found in a chest inside the Church of Vows in Liurnia. The Church of Vows is also where Miriel, Pastor of Vows, resides, and where players can use the Celestial Dew item to absolve sins against NPCs. The pest thread spell itself is named for the small spore balloon pests found throughout Mount Gelmir and the Altus Plateau. Creatures that explode in a burst of their signature thread attack. Pest threads is the player-usable version of a move that only mindless, spore-driven insects normally execute. The fact that it is found in a church associated with sacred oaths and divine absolution, and that a turtle who maintains divine order lives there, suggests someone brought it there as an offering, or was perhaps driven out of a holy place by it. Pest threads has become one of the most beloved pure damage incantations, for faith builds due to its exceptional hit density against large bosses. The Heal from Afar incantation. Heal from Afar is one of the more mechanically specific incantations in the game. It targets an ally at range and restores a large portion of their health without the caster needing to be close to them. In cooperative play, this makes it uniquely valuable. A host fighting a boss can be sustained from a distance without requiring the support player to enter the boss's attack radius. The incantation is acquired relatively late, sold by Brother Corin after sufficient questline progress, but its practical value is immediate and obvious the moment you use it in co-op. The spell's existence is quietly optimistic in a world full of catastrophe. Here is a faith incantation designed not for combat, not for buffs, but specifically to reach across a distance and help someone who is struggling. In Elden Ring, where survival is brutally individual, a spell built entirely around helping a specific other person is something close to radical. The Sacred Order Blade and Weapon buff. Philosophy. The Golden Order school includes several incantations designed to coat weapons in holy energy. Sacred Blade, Order's Blade, and Black Flame Blade for the Godskin school. These weapon enchantment incantations represent one of the core philosophical arguments that faith-based builds make, that the body doing the physical work becomes more sacred when consecrated. The weapon is the same. The intent and the blessing change what it does. Sacred Blade adds holy damage to the weapon's natural damage, making it especially effective against undead enemies who resist physical force, but are deeply vulnerable to the correction of the Golden Order. Each swing of a Sacred Blade weapon is a small act of the Order normalizing the world, putting something back into alignment that the shattering disrupted. The aspects of the Crucible. Breath. Aspects of the Crucible. Breath, the incantation that produces a cone of golden primordial fire from the caster's throat, is one of the most visually distinctive spells in the game and one of the hardest to obtain. It is dropped by the Crucible Knight Ordoviz, found in a particularly punishing Evergoal on the Altus Plateau, where two Crucible Knights fight together simultaneously. The flame it produces is not ordinary fire. It is the warmth of the Tree's primordial biology, a fire that predates the Golden Order's distinction between holy light and destructive flame. Crucible Breath deals both fire and physical damage, a combination almost unique in the incantation catalogue, because before the Golden Order separated the sacred from the dangerous, fire was simply alive. Something that grew and breathed and burned without being categorized as either good or harmful. The Bestial Sling's PV. P-Legacy. Bestial Sling. The second incantation obtained from Gurranq, requiring 2 death root, had, at Elden Ring's launch, a notoriety in player versus player combat that its humble appearance did not suggest. It fired rapidly, could interrupt enemy spell casts and healing animations, and applied fast physical poise damage that staggered opponents out of their attacks. It was one of the most efficient action interrupters in the PvP meta. A low-investment incantation that functioned like an instant cast pressure tool. Multiple patches later, its stagger potential was significantly reduced. The bestial sling that exists today is a quieter spell, still useful for physical range damage, still a reasonable choice in certain builds. But it carries the memory of a period when Gurrank's most modest gift was genuinely feared by other players. Malekith's legacy, even at one remove, has always had unexpected teeth. The Beast Eye's navigation function. Among the items Gurrank grants to the Tarnished in exchange for Deathroot is the Beast Eye, a small, unnerving item described as a source that gives rise to those who live in death. While held in the player's inventory, it activates with the notification, "The Beast Eye quivers," whenever the player is near an area containing a Deathroot. It functions as a living compass, a piece of primordial perception borrowed from Gurrank's own beast nature, pointing toward the fuel that sustains his terrible hunger. Most players use it as a navigation tool without fully registering the implication. They are carrying a piece of Gurrank inside them, a fragment of the beast clergyman's senses, and it reacts independently of their own perception. The Beast Eye is not a quest item that updates a tracker. It is an organ, on loan. The Stone of Gurrank's Boulder philosophy. Stone of Gurrank, the 6th Deathroot reward, hurls a boulder at enemies that can be cast repeatedly in rapid succession. The description identifies it as a superior incantation taught by Gurrank, and notes that his former name meant Death of the Demigods, giving even this straightforward rock-throwing spell a weight of historical violence. Unlike most incantation schools that deal elemental damage, Stone of Gurrank deals physical damage, blunt, gravitational, the most mundane of damage types. There is something appropriate about the fact that a being once called the Death of Demigods, stripped of his most fearsome identity, reduced to a hooded penitent, sorting through fragments of death in a far-off sanctum, teaches an incantation that is just throwing rocks. The grandeur has been eroded. What remains is still lethal, but it is a lethal that knows it used to be something more. The Bestial Vitality's quiet excellence. Bestial Vitality, the 3rd Deathroot reward, is a healing incantation that slowly regenerates the caster's health over a long duration. On a per-second basis, the regeneration is modest, but the duration is long enough that, across an extended fight with a challenging boss, the cumulative healing is enormous. More importantly, Bestial Vitality requires very little faith investment and costs little FP relative to the healing it eventually provides. Many guides describe it as the best healing incantation in the game for endurance fighters. Better than the larger single-cast heals, because it works passively while you roll and strike and survive. The beast nature of the incantation, its source in Gurrank, in primordial animal resilience, turns out to be the source of its strength. Not divine restoration, but biological stubbornness, the body refusing to give up on itself. The Malekith recognition dialogue. If the player has given all 9 Deathroots to Gurrank before travelling to crumbling Fara Mazula, Malekith, the Black Blade, the final gateway boss before the endgame, will recognise the Tarnished with special dialogue in the fight. Malekith's first phase is Gurrank. The same model, the same attacks, the same voice. When the transformation to the second phase triggers, Malekith's dialogue acknowledges the Tarnished as someone who has already met him, spoken with him, completed his penance with him. The recognition is not warmth exactly, Malekith fights with full ferocity regardless. But it is acknowledgement. You are not strangers. You shared something in the bestial sanctum. The game notes that you gave him death root he consumed in search of absolution. And now here he is at the end of everything, fighting you in the ruins of time itself. The incantations he taught you will likely be the ones you use against him. The Elden Ring achievement and the 3 legendaries. The game's achievement system asks players to collect all 3 legendary incantations: Elden Stars, Flame of the Fell God, and Graol's Roar. These 3 represent, in order, the founding cosmological act of the Greater Will, the ancient fire of a conquered rival god, and the stolen voice of the oldest sleeping dragon. Together, they outline a history of divine violence. The Greater Will planted its seed. The Fell God was subjugated. The dragons were diminished. The achievement for collecting all 3, legendary sorceries and incantations, is awarded without fanfare, as though the game itself recognizes that cataloging divine tragedy is its own quiet kind of completion. Each spell is a fragment of a story that the game will never tell you entirely, and holding all 3 feels less like a reward than a responsibility. The seal interactions. No one explains. Many sacred seals in Elden Ring have specific schools they boost that players only discover through experimentation or wiki diving. The Clawmark seal boosts bestial incantations. The Dragon Communion seal boosts Dragon Communion incantations. The Giant seal boosts Giant's Flame incantations. The Fire Knight seal boosts Mesmer Flame incantations. But the game does not mark this on any item tooltip beyond the seal's own description, and seal descriptions are not always sorted by their relevance to your current loadout. Players who invest in bestial incantations without knowing the Clawmark seal exists will be dealing measurably less damage than their build warrants. This knowledge gap is a feature, not a bug. It creates the distinctive discovery culture around Elden Ring systems, where the game consistently withholds mechanical clarity in favor of depth that rewards attention. The nomadic merchant's frenzied flame arms. Every single nomadic merchant wandering the roads of the lands between uses frenzied flame incantations if attacked. Not just fire, not just fists. The specific madness-spreading yellow fire of the 3 fingers. The implication is direct. The merchant people, historically persecuted and eventually buried alive for heretical beliefs, have an intimate connection to the outer god that preaches dissolution of all individuality and all suffering. Their frenzied flame is not an accident of programming. It is a preserved tradition, a heresy passed down in survival. Every time you buy arrows or larval tears from a roadside merchant and watch them settle back into their calm routine, you are speaking with a practitioner of the frenzied flame, someone who chose, in the face of everything the Golden Order did to their people, to carry the fire forward anyway. The fact that they sell you tools for survival is the most bittersweet detail in the game. The casting speed and the Radagon icon. One of the most universally recommended talismans for any incantation build is the Radagon icon, which shortens the cast time of all spells, incantations included. It is found in a chest in the debate parlor of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, and its description references Radagon's own study of magic. As someone who practiced both sorcery and incantations, he sought ways to cast faster, to bridge the gap between spell types, to eliminate the tactical disadvantage of the long cast animation. The icon encodes that aspiration. Every incantation user who equips it is benefiting from the research of the god, who later became Queen Marika, whose incantation school shaped the world, and whose dual identity the game eventually forces you to reveal through the very incantation. most benefited by the icon, Law of Regression. Radagon's talisman is both a practical gift and an inadvertent confession. The incantation count beyond 100. The base game of Elden Ring shipped with over 100 individual incantations, and Shadow of the Erdtree added 28 more, bringing the total incantation count well into the territory that sorceries, with their own large collection, still cannot match numerically. The deliberate scale of the incantation system was noted even at launch as a deviation from the earlier Dark Souls formula, where miracles and pyromancies were separate schools with smaller offerings. In Elden Ring, faith was given such expansive coverage, healing, combat, buffing, debuffing, utility, school-specific specialization, that it became the most versatile stat in the entire game. The design intent was to ensure that a faith build had an answer to nearly any encounter, and the sheer number of incantations is the evidence of that commitment. More than 100 ways to pray in a world where prayer cost everything. The incantation of remembrance. Rarity. Across the game's bosses, only a handful offer an incantation as one of the two remembrance choices. Morg's remembrance gives Blood Boon. Malekith's remembrance gives Black Blade. Rykard's remembrance gives Rykard's Rancor. The Elden Beast's remembrance gives Elden Stars, and so on. These remembrance incantations tend to be among the most visually spectacular in their respective schools, directly emulating a boss ability the player just survived. Casting Rykard's Rancor, which floods the air with serpentine skulls of lava, is an act of becoming, however briefly, the Lord of Blasphemy, who just tried to eat you. Every remembrance incantation is the game's invitation to absorb the power of the thing you destroyed and carry that encounter's violence forward as your own. The incantation menu's lore density. If you were to read every item description of every incantation in the game from beginning to end, all 100 and more, you would have the closest thing Elden Ring has to a complete history of the lands between. The schools of magic are timelines. Dragon Communion predates the Erdtree. Bestial incantations come from a pre-Golden Order age when beasts had just gained intelligence. The Crucible spells recall the primordial biology of the Erdtree's first era. The Golden Order incantations document the reign of Marika and Radagon. The Black Flame spells carried the memory of the Gloam-Eyed Queen's rebellion. The Frenzied Flame spells come from outside the Order entirely. The Blood and Mesmer incantations come from the hidden purge in the Land of Shadow. Reading incantation descriptions in chronological order by lore era is one of the most coherent ways to understand what happened here, and yet nowhere in the game is that order ever given to you. You have to build the timeline yourself, one entry at a time, one cast at a time.